Some cars are remembered for their power, others for their beauty. Then there are those so unusual, you wonder how they ever made it onto the road at all. The Bohse Euro-Star is one of those cars. Born in Germany, built on Soviet bones, and styled like a beach buggy with a midlife crisis, it is a strange, forgotten chapter of European car history. And yet, behind the odd shape and removable roof panels, is a real story of one man's plan to take an old idea and drive it somewhere new. The story begins in Dorpen, a small town in Emsland, Germany. That is where Johann Bohse started Bohse Automobilbau GmbH in the late 1980s. He had an idea: build small, cheap, open-top cars for vacation spots and rentals. His first attempt was the Bohse Sprinter in 1987. It was based on the Volkswagen Golf Mark I. Only 30 were made. It had a fiberglass body and reused Golf parts, including the headlights. Not a huge success, but Johann was not done. Soon came the Bohse Euro-Star. This time, the base car was not German, but Soviet. It was the Lada 2105, also called the Vaz 2105. Bohse kept the engine, the rear-wheel drive system, and even the dashboard. The difference was the body. He cut off the roof, added a hard fiberglass shell, and created a strange mix of Soviet engineering and German beach style. The body had two Targa-style removable roof panels, soft fabric doors with plastic windows, and no rear window. The rear had a small pickup bed and an enclosed trunk. From 1988 to 1989, about 200 of these cars were made. Bohse sold them for about 7,000 Deutsche Marks each. They were not luxury cars. They were built for fun, short drives, and maybe a little sunburn. Most were sent to places where people went on vacation. The Euro-Star was light, around 2,160 pounds, and measured about 165 inches long. It stood about 62 inches tall. The engine was a 1.2-litre inline-4 with about 59 horsepower and 64 pound-feet of torque. It had a 4-speed manual transmission. The rear axle ratio was 4.3, and it could hit about 87 miles per hour. Not fast, but it moved. The car was simple. It had no power steering or air conditioning, no radio unless someone added one. But the idea was not comfort. It was something to drive near the beach, with the wind in your hair and no doors to stop it. It was a little strange, and maybe that is why it did not last long. By the early 1990s, Bohse stopped making cars. Johann Bohse had health problems, and the company closed. But the story did not end there. Around 50 leftover Euro-Stars were sold off. Later, Bohse tried again with the Bohse Safari, based on the Lada Samara 2108. That car did better, and even got rebranded by Lada as the Samara Fun. Today, a few Euro-Stars still survive. You might see one at a car show in Germany or Central Europe. They are not powerful, they are not fast, but they are real, and they tell a story of what happens when one man in a small town thinks, "What if I turned a Lada into something else?" In the mid-1970s, Japan's car market saw something strange. It was big, heavy, drank fuel like a whale, and had a weird buzzing engine sound. Most people had no idea what it was doing there. It was not a Toyota or Nissan or anything common. This was the Mazda Road Pacer AP, a name not many outside Japan know today, and even in Japan, most people either forgot about it or never knew it existed. But this forgotten car has one of the oddest and most confusing stories in car history. The Mazda Road Pacer AP came out in 1975, during a time when Japan was still growing fast and companies wanted to look more official and powerful. Mazda, based in Hiroshima, wanted to build a car for top government officials and business leaders. But instead of designing something new from the ground up, Mazda did something strange. They ordered the body and chassis of the Holden HJ Premier from General Motors' Australian division. Holden would send the big empty cars to Japan. No engine, no transmission, just the shell. Mazda then did the most Mazda-like thing possible. They dropped in their 13B rotary engine. The 13B, or 1.3-litre twin-rotor Wankel engine, was famous for being light, smooth, and high revving. It made about 133 horsepower and 101 pound-feet of torque. That sounds all right, until you remember that the Road Pacer weighed around 3,472 pounds. The poor engine had to push a car heavier than most muscle cars, but with torque barely above a lawnmower. The result? It was very slow, but it was smooth. Very smooth. So smooth that passengers could fall asleep before they even got to the corner. Mazda named it AP to stand for anti-pollution. That was added in October 1975 to meet new emission rules in Japan. The car was big and roomy, with a 111-inch wheelbase. It had gadgets like automatic door locks that kicked in at 6 miles per hour, a voice warning system that would speak up at 56 miles per hour, and a dictation system for recording memos while driving. It even had stereo controls for backseat passengers. The inside was fancy for its time, with either bucket seats and a center console or a front bench seat that could fit 3 people. Between 1975 and 1977, Mazda built only around 800 Road Pacers. They sold 399 in the first year, 240 in 1976, 119 in 1977, and the last few, less than 50, trickled out until 1979. Most buyers were Japanese government offices. Very few private citizens bought them, maybe because the price in 1975 was about 3.8 million yen, which was more than a Toyota Century. And with fuel economy around 9 miles per gallon, it was not something you wanted during the oil crisis. People soon realized the Road Pacer was not a good mix. It had the size and looks of a Western luxury sedan, but the power of a tiny sports car. Most of them were scrapped after a few years. Today, only a handful survive in museums or private collections. In Germany, one sits in the Mazda Classic Museum in Augsburg. Another rare example shows up in New Zealand from time to time. The Mazda Road Pacer AP was not a success, but it was a bold experiment. A heavy Australian body, a tiny Japanese rotary engine, and a mission to serve the elite. What could go wrong? Turns out a lot. But that is what makes it worth remembering. In the late 1950s, Germany saw a very strange and tiny van roll onto its streets. It was not flashy, not fast, and definitely not roomy. But it had a job to do, and it did it with surprising determination. Called the Goggomobil TL Transporter, this little van was built for carrying letters, packages, and small cargo. It looked like a toy, but worked like a tool. Most people have never heard of it, but once you do, it is hard to forget a van that could almost fit inside another van. The Goggomobil TL Transporter was built by a company called Hans Glas GmbH, located in Dingolfing, West Germany. Glas was not a giant car maker, but they were clever. Before cars, they built farming machines and scooters. Then, in 1956, they launched the Goggomobil TL Transporter, or TL for short. TL stood for Transporter Lieferwagen, which means delivery van in German. This van was made because the Deutsche Bundespost, or the German Federal Postal Service, needed something new to replace their 3-wheeled Tempo Boy mail vehicles. The Tempo Boy was getting old and slow, and the mail still had to go through wind, rain, and bratwurst festivals. At the 1956 IFMA show in Frankfurt, Glas showed off the first version of the TL. A year later, in October 1957, deliveries to the Postal Service began. The TL looked small because it was small. It had sliding front doors and a tall body with either double rear doors or a pickup-style tailgate. Most TLs were painted bright yellow for the postal service, which made them easy to spot from down the block. Glas built a total of 3,665 units until production stopped in November 1965. About 2,000 of those were used by the post office. Others were sold to cities and small businesses. The engines came in 3 versions: the TL250, the TL300, and the TL400. All were 2-stroke, air-cooled twin-cylinder engines placed in the back. The TL250 had 14 horsepower and a top speed around 41 miles per hour. The TL300 went slightly faster, and the TL400 reached about 47 miles per hour with its 20 horsepower. Not exactly race car numbers, but good enough for mail and bread delivery. The TL also had a 4-speed manual transmission, and some had an electric gear pre-selector from Getrag, which made stop-and-go driving a little easier. The van had a wheelbase of 70.8 inches and weighed about 1,014 pounds when empty. It could carry a payload of around 661 pounds. A full tank held about 6.6 gallons of fuel. This little vehicle could really haul for its size, though not in a hurry. Some even had snowplow setups or were used for street cleaning in German towns. A few rare versions of the Goggomobil TL Transporter were sold in modern auctions. One 1958 TL250 sold for $98,000. An even rarer TL400 Pez edition, with a more powerful 20-horsepower engine, went for $172,500. Not bad for something that once delivered postcards. Now nearly impossible to find, the Goggomobil TL Transporter has become a quiet legend of German engineering. It never tried to impress, but it always showed up. On time, in yellow, and ready to deliver. There was once a tiny German car that tried to do everything, be a family wagon, a race car, and even a camper. It came from a company better known for making agricultural machinery and scooters. That car was the Glas Isar Combi. It may not have taken over the world, but its story is full of odd decisions, small victories, and plenty of rattling noises. And it all began in the late 1950s, in a place called Dingolfing, West Germany. The company behind it was Hans Glas GmbH, founded by Hans Glas. They were already known for the Goggomobil, a popular tiny car. Hoping to step up into a slightly bigger market, they started designing a new model. It first appeared in 1957 at the Frankfurt International Motor Show. People called it the Große Goggomobil, which simply means the big Goggomobil. It had a front engine and front-wheel drive. But that setup caused handling problems, so Glas quickly changed it to rear-wheel drive. This move made the car more stable, but changed a lot of the original design. Production began on June 12, 1958. The first versions were named T600 and T700. The T600 had a 584 cubic centimeter air-cooled 2-cylinder Boxer engine that produced about 20 horsepower. It could reach a top speed of about 61 miles per hour. The T700, with a 688 cubic centimeter engine, managed 30 horsepower and could go up to 68 miles per hour. In November 1959, the models were renamed to Glas Isar T600 and T700. The Combi version was introduced at the same time. It was called the K600 or K700 Combi, depending on the engine. The Isar Combi was a small station wagon with a steel body and a flat rear roof. It weighed around 1,590 pounds and was about 136 inches long, 58 inches wide, and nearly 55 inches tall. It had drum brakes on all wheels and used a 4-speed gearbox with a rather unusual upside-down shift pattern. The electrical system was 12 volts, which was pretty fancy at the time for such a small car. But the Isar Combi had some problems. Early versions had engine block warping issues and body flex that sometimes caused the windshields to crack. Gearbox problems were also common. Glas worked hard to fix them. By 1960 the car had a stronger body, a new Solex carburetor, and improved interior features. Even the rear window was made bigger for better visibility. There was also a special camper version with a removable back seat that turned the inside into a small bed. Despite its problems, the Isar Combi found some success. It even won races like the 12-hour Nürburgring event in its class and did well in Austrian hill climbs. In Argentina, a version of the car was built under the name Isard, where nearly 14,000 combis were made. In total, Glas made around 14,274 combi units and over 73,000 Isar cars overall. By August 1965, Glas stopped making the Isar Combi to make room for newer models like the Glas 1004. A year later, the company was bought by BMW, mainly because Glas had good technology, especially in timing belts. The Glas name slowly disappeared, but the Isar Combi remains a quirky piece of car history. It was a small wagon that tried hard to be useful, fun, and sometimes even sporty, just maybe not all at once.